All right, Shehan, first thing, let's talk UCF. Scott Frost is back. How do you think that's going to go? What's your expectation for Scott Frost round 2 at UCF?
Well, it's fascinating, right? Because we know that he is an innovative coach. We know that he has very athletic teams, very attacking teams. But also, he's been out of college football for several years at this point. Now, I got a chance to talk to Terry Mohajir yesterday about it. And one of the huge draws of hiring Coach Frost back was that he had spent some time with Sean McVay. He had learned a little bit more about offense. But, I think the thing that I really wanted to try to get from him, that I don't know that I did in my conversations with Coach Frost yesterday, was like, is he ready for this? Is he ready for how much the sport has changed and how much UCF has changed in the past 10 years or so? So I'm fascinated to see, I'm excited to see, and again, I know that he's motivated to at least try to get it right.
Well, you mentioned talking to Terry Mohajir. You had a piece previewing the Big 12 Media Day where you had a question for each school. Your question for UCF got some attention, I believe. I think the quote may have been, "What are we doing here?" And that's a paraphrase, right? But obviously that's on CBS.com if you want to read that. But Shehan, did you learn more about what UCF's doing? Did you get that question answered here after meeting with them yesterday?
I'd say somewhat. I would have liked a little more, to be quite honest. And the reason that I asked that question is because when you look at their roster, so much of it was having to do with damage control, right? They had to put together half a roster in no time at all. It's a tough situation to be in for any coach. And so, you kind of hear the phrase year zero. This is going to be a year zero in a lot of ways. And so I'm kind of curious to see, again, I know what Scott Frost is and what this program will be from an offensive scheme perspective and, the tempo stuff and the changing things up. But I want to see, what's the roster vision, right? I think that at times Coach Malzahn struggled with that. He had sort of these great players come in, but there wasn't necessarily a clear identity that emerged, especially when the rest of the Big 12 kind of caught up to what Coach Malzahn does offensively. And so I'm curious, and we're going to learn more about that, not just through this first roster, but how he approaches recruiting, how he approaches the portal, and also what he kind of hangs his hat on from a scheme perspective.
Obviously, you've covered the Big 12 for a long time. Scott Frost not the only one coming to UCF. The name of Alex Grinch is also appearing on the UCF coaching staff. Obviously, you're familiar with Alex Grinch, his time in the Big 12. What are your expectations for Alex Grinch getting another shot at a D coordinator position?
Well, I think that this is a much better fit than some of his previous stops. I think that, for him, right, he's kind of gotten the moniker of the speed defense and all this sort of stuff, and that kind of fits a lot of the identity of how UCF had their success in the past, was by being aggressive, having super fast players, having access to the talent in Florida is, I think, a huge part of the dynamic as well. And he didn't always have that at Oklahoma and USC. Now, look, he also needs to adjust. He also needs to, limit yardage a little bit more than what he has in the past. But I think that this might be a marriage that makes some sense with the way that they want to run their program, with the access to talent that they have. So I expect crashing DBs. I expect a lot of speed on the back end. And I expect a roster that is really able to attack from every angle.
All right, last one. What are reasonable expectations for this team? Obviously, we don't do a media poll anymore, right? But if we did, I envision UCF's on probably the back half of that poll. What do you think are reasonable expectations for year one?
Well, and I'll tell you straight up, if I had a vote, I would have probably put UCF last in this poll. Less because I think UCF is going to be horrible by any means, and more because I look around and I see a lot of programs that can compete. And so for UCF, I think to be in contention for a bowl and have a chance to go to a bowl would be a really good first year and a really good first step for Coach Frost. Obviously, they go 4-8 last year, first missed bowl in a little while at UCF. For them to be competitive, be back in that situation, contend in games against better opponents on their schedule, I think that that's where you want to be. The wins don't necessarily have to come right now, but I think you want to see where wins will come from in the future.
All right, we're here with Bruce Feldman. Bruce, Scott Frost is back at UCF. Did you ever think that would happen, and what do you think of the move now?
It's not entirely shocking because Rich Rod's back at West Virginia,
sure.
And this thing happens. But it's a little surprising, but not shocking, because obviously he had 2 great years there, and he has some connections around the state. Now it's a bigger job because it's in the Big 12, right? So I'm fascinated to see how it goes. I know he's got some talented quarterbacks who are really raw.
Yeah.
I've heard about Taven Jackson before he got to college. People thought he was super talented. So interested to see what he does with this.
For it to work, what does he have to do? What do you think he has to kind of nail if he wants to make this second chance at UCF work?
I think the first thing is they got to get a quarterback who gets comfortable and becomes a playmaker. There's a lot of good quarterbacks in this league. I think he's definitely knows what he's doing when it comes to that. He's seen it. Obviously, guys, whether it's Mariota or, different people he's been around. To me, that's a big piece of this. I'm really interested to see what the coordinator hires. Like his OC, Cooper, who had been with him at Nebraska, is a really sharp guy. Now it's his opportunity. I think Alex Grinch was a terrific DC for Washington State, and obviously Scott knows that. And I know at USC it was really shaky, but I think, it's going to be, I think with the athletes he has, there's a lot of fast, athletic guys you can move around. That's they were really aggressive at Wazoo, and I think if they can get that going, I do think he has some of the talent already in there that fits his system. So for me, it's like if they can get to 6 wins, I think that's a good start.
Well, you mentioned Frost and Grinch, 2 coaches who have chips on their shoulders, right? Didn't go well the last time. Do you think that's a winning strategy? Like, does having the chip on the shoulder mentality, is that something that you think they can seize on to be successful?
I think it is. I mean, it can go both ways, but there's plenty of coaches who had that, I'm going to show you kind of vibe. And I think a lot of coaches, most coaches end up getting fired at one point or another, like I know Alex pretty well, and I thought Alex was a guy who, I know guys who worked with him who thought he was brilliant at what he did, and he was like the hot coach, and then it was kind of starting to fizzle at Oklahoma, and then he got out to USC. They didn't have a ton of, it wasn't like typical USC talent, but like when things start going south, it's hard to turn it around. But I think fresh start for those guys, I think, can work. I mean, I thought Scott was a home run hire in Lincoln. He was going home. I remember being there and talking to him, and it was like sounded like it was going to be like, hey, Wisconsin recruited this way. They had a coveted quarterback when he got there, and for a variety of reasons, it just didn't work. But I think so much, when he got to UCF the first time, he followed George O'Leary, who had brought some challenges to himself, but he had some good players, and it seemed like Scott and that staff cut those guys loose and knew how to work with it, and it took off after a year. So we'll see what he's learned this time around. Everything's the same, but everything's still kind of different too.
Curious, you travel the country covering college football. Year 3 for UCF in the Big 12. First 2 years haven't gone as well as I think they'd hoped. Where do you think UCF fits nationally right now? How relevant are they? What do they need to do to sort of get themselves into that conversation where they're a more consistent program?
I think they got to develop an identity and just have some continuity, because they've had some talent there. I thought last year was going to go better because you had Gus, you had a quarterback who was really good at Arkansas, you had 3 running backs who were really dynamic, and I thought, this is going to be a problem to play Gus. And then all of a sudden it felt like they hit mid-season. It was almost like they ran out of gas. You'd know better than me of why things just fizzled out there. But you can get players there. We've seen success. There's no reason why this program can't be a 10-win team at some point soon in the Big 12. It's not like they're in a conference that has these superpowers that are going to out-recruit them. They have as good a recruiting base as anybody in the conference. You have obviously a lot of assets there. We went to Big Noon there last year in like 1,000-degree heat and humidity.
Yes, you did.
And they, there's a lot of selling points there. I mean, they could be the powerhouse of the Big 12 if Scott hits it right. I don't know if he will, but there's no reason for that not to be. You have a good AD. I know people think highly of Terry, and it's not like they haven't had success before. It's not like they're in the SEC now, right? They're in a good league that's competitive, but we just saw Arizona State come off the ground and win the league and almost beat Texas in the playoffs. So.
All right, Andy Staples on 3 Sports. Andy, Scott Frost, I don't know if you heard this, is back at UCF. What do you make of the move of Scott coming back to the Knights?
It was pretty good the first time around.
It was.
We talked to him a little bit about it yesterday, and it's interesting because the world has changed completely since he was at UCF, but it actually probably puts UCF in a better position to be ultimately successful. And you kind of wonder, you go back to 2017, what if the world were like it is now?
Yeah.
That team makes the 12-team playoff. That team, and I think going into that Peach Bowl against Auburn, and Scott will tell you this, he didn't know that they were going to be able to beat Auburn, but they go play them, and they beat them pretty good. that's the kind of team they might have seen first round of the playoffs. Well, second round of the playoffs. Who knows? Maybe they had a bye. So it's really interesting to see him get a chance to do that again with a different world. Now, obviously, he's coming off the Nebraska stint, which did not go well at all. But we're going to find out whether that's a Nebraska thing, a Scott Frost thing, or all the above.
How do you think he'll do recruiting in Central Florida, especially these days? NIL's a big piece. UCF's not going to have the biggest check a lot of times. How do you think he'll do from a recruiting standpoint back in that market? Because he killed it the first time. I mean, he found some diamonds in the first time.
But the thing is, like, okay, Tristan Hill is a good example of this.
Sure.
Tristan Hill is a kid from Live Oak, Florida. He had one other offer, I believe it was Virginia, and I don't know that he got into Virginia. But that's the kind of player, a defensive tackle, supposed to be the body type that's really hard to find, that when you're trying to recruit those guys, you may have to pay a premium for these days. But he would have gotten him for peanuts in the NIL era.
Yeah.
And he became an NFL player. So I think he's got the eye for it and he understands. And being in Orlando, you're going to have access to lots of good players. You're going to have access to transfers who want to move back to Florida, who maybe went away from home for school and decided, you know what, it didn't work out for me. I want to go back closer to home. So there's absolutely an opportunity there. And because I think at UCF, you should always have good skill. There's no reason to not have good skill because you can find really good skill nearby. And let's say you don't get exactly what you want because Georgia came down or Florida came down or Miami came up. Like, you're still going to be able to get really good players because there's just a high volume of them. On the line of scrimmage is a little bit different. That person's a little more rare. But I just gave you an example of a D lineman from Florida who turned into a really good player. And I mean, Tristan Hill could have played anywhere in the country. Mm-hmm. And so that's the kind of thing they've got to be able to do. Can you get those guys? And that's where you're going to have to manage your budget and figure that out. But I do think being in an area where there are lots of good players, and the thing is, like, Orlando is an easy trip from South Georgia, sure. From the Carolinas. So there's a really good base of talent that they can recruit that can drive to your campus, that can take a bunch of unofficial visits, that get to know you. And so I think they have a good chance of success.
What do you make of the hire of Alex Grinch as defensive coordinator?
Well, he's been through the ringer too. Yeah. And I would say hopefully he's figured out that large defensive linemen are better than tiny defensive linemen. Because that's something that it seemed like it was an issue at USC. And look, I know, like, when he was at Washington State, he was fantastic working with Mike Leach. And I think a lot of the stuff he did because he had to do there, and it worked, and maybe that kind of cemented it. But Alex Grinch also comes from a good coaching tree. He's related to Gary Pinkel, the great coach at Missouri. Like, he knows what he's doing, and I think if he gets past some of those things that he was doing at USC and tries to take a little more conventional approach to personnel, they can be pretty good.
70 new players on UCF's roster this year. What's a fair expectation, you think, from a record perspective, that you would say, hey, it was a successful year for UCF?
Well, it's the Big 12, so it's very hard to say because the team that got picked to finish last year finished number one. Sure. So, I'd say, make a bowl game. Kind of let's go back to year one, the first time around for Scott Frost. Yep. Where they go 6-6, lost the Cure Bowl, like, kind of figured out Mackenzie Milton was their guy at quarterback. Like, if you can have a decent season, go to a bowl game, and kind of figure out where you need to build on. Because that's the hardest part now, is this sport's so transient. When you've got all these new players, you could conceivably have as many new players next year. Yeah. So find what you like, find what works. And this will sound weird. Colorado is an interesting example here. Remember when Deion got to Colorado, it was the same thing. Massive roster overhaul. Second year, pretty big roster overhaul. This year, not really. This year, it's much more close to almost everybody else in terms of turnover. That's what you do. You figure out what you like, what works, what kind of guys work for you, and you build on that. So the trial and error of this year is going to be really interesting because there's no coach in America that can take 70 new players and know exactly what his team's going to be week one.
Yeah. All right, here with Ross Dellenger. Ross, Scott Frost is back at UCF?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was talking to Scott yesterday here. We've seen a lot of coaches come back, right, over the years to their original school, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I know I talked to him about being back and how so many things have changed, right? Not his office and not the facility as much, but everything off the field in college athletics. But it seems like he's excited to be back and adjusting to the new world.
If it's going to work, how do you think it's going to work? What do you think he has to do to kind of change maybe the perception or the stench that is there from Nebraska?
Yeah, that's something that I know came up at Media Day.
I heard about that, yeah.
Right, don't take the wrong job quote and all that. Well, you got to win, right? So you got to find out how to win, and you've got to adjust to the new world and the new environment that everybody's in right now, which is a salary cap environment and paying players, and it's changed recruiting, it's changed all that. So as long as you win enough, I think that stench, so to speak, will come off.
What do you think expectations should be for this team? 70 new players, a complete roster turnover, new coaching staff. What are reasonable expectations?
Well, and you look at the struggles in the first year or so in the Big 12, right? And then you lop on a new coach and all these new players. I think everybody should probably lower whatever expectations they have a little bit, And I asked him that actually while we were sitting together. And he was just sort of like, I don't know what to expect, right? To me, it's a new team, of course, but it's a new team to everybody. So who knows?
Devin Gardner from Fox Sports. Devin, Scott Frost comes back to the Knights.
Yes.
Do you think it can work for go-round number 2 in Scott Frost?
Certainly. Obviously, it's going to be a lot different than what he experienced before, just because of the nature of the conference and how wide open it is. But I think that's also a plus, that he gets a chance to be in a conference that's wide open, and he's proven to be a good coach. He's proven to make it work at UCF, so he understands the challenges and the pathways to get to success. So I think he's uniquely set up to make sure he has an opportunity. The one thing he has to do is have a quarterback, because if you have a quarterback, you have a chance.
Well, I'm curious from a player standpoint. Obviously, things didn't go well in Nebraska. As a player, if you come and you're playing for Coach Frost, do you care about that? Does that matter to you at all? Do you care what a coach maybe has done in the past?
Certainly. I do care because of the success at UCF, right? You kind of look and you say, well, he knows what it's like to have success here. So now you can move forward and feel confident that he's going to be able to recreate that same success. So I think it's really important that he's had success there. Now, if he was going back to Nebraska where he didn't have much success, that would be important as well. But at UCF, he had great success. So I would imagine recruits and transfers alike would say, hey, I think he can recreate that, and it'll allow you to get good players.
It's obviously not uncommon right now with the portal to see a lot of change. 70-plus new players on this Knights team. What kind of challenge is that from a coach and from a player standpoint?
Well, so the biggest challenge for me would be the ability to create a culture and understand what kind of kids you're getting, because when you get that many kids, it's hard to vet them all and see what kind of personality they have and do they match what you actually have. So you almost kind of roll the dice, like, this kid's talented. Is he what we want as a person? We're not quite sure, but we do need players. So you have to find those players, and at 70, it's very tough to see, but you have to weed it out. That's what camp is for, and all those different things to find out who matches your personality and who can really contribute.
As a former player, as an athlete, as a competitor, is there something to be had for having a chip on your shoulder?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of folks at the Knights, right, you have Scott Frost looking to prove something, Alex Grinch, D coordinator, looking to prove something. A lot of guys who maybe weren't recruited by UCF now coming in there, lower schools. Do you think there's something to having a chip on the shoulder? Can that actually be something you use to be successful?
Without question. I watched Max Duggan go be second in the Heisman with a chip on his shoulder, right? And a lot of it was because of that chip and people not believing in him and him having to take a different route than the top quarterbacks, right? And so I think that is something that you can lean into, right? You can be that underdog. I remember as a player playing at University of Michigan, playing against Michigan State, and Mark D'Antonio created a chip that never was removed, right? And it's very difficult to play against teams like that, especially when there's a chip plus good coaching plus good players. It makes it really difficult to beat that team, and if they can create that, I think that they have a real chance. But now, you can't just have a chip and that's it. You got to be able to play.
You got to play too.
You got to be able to play.
Well, we don't do a media poll anymore in the Big 12, but if we did, I imagine UCF's probably on the back half of that poll. What are reasonable expectations that you think fans could have for year one of Scott Frost?
What I would love to see is competition, right? The ability to compete in games and win some of the games you're not supposed to win, right? Obviously, there are games you're going to get into and it's going to say, well, you should win that game. But those ones where you don't really have a chance, I want to see them maybe not win all of those games, but win a few of them just to show, hey, you can come to UCF and be successful and win a Power 4 conference.
All right, Brandon, Last time we talked, Gus Malzahn was the head coach at UCF.
Yeah.
That's not the case anymore. He's at Florida State, and Scott Frost is back. A sentence I never thought I'd say, but what do you make of Scott Frost coming back to UCF?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways it just makes sense. I think, it's crazy. You never see a coach who goes and, does so badly at a big school at Nebraska and then gets a second chance to come back somewhere. And, like, almost everybody's rooting for him. Like, other fan bases, the media, they're just like, you know what? You probably should have never left UCF in the first place.
Yeah.
There's no telling what UCF could have become if he had stayed there. Obviously, there's some success there afterward, but he was starting to build something there. And considering his style and the culture he had built there, I mean, there's no telling what UCF would have been able to do. But now he gets that second chance, and now with it being a power program, he's got an opportunity here to really capitalize in a community, obviously, that's just, kind of blossoming into something that could be really big in the future.
What do you think success will look like? 70 new players on this roster, whole new coaching staff. In year one of this new endeavor, what is success going to look like?
If they were to get to a bowl game, I think that would be very successful. But the other thing is, it's like you get so many new players, as you mentioned, you don't quite know what to expect. But, I was talking to Scott Frost the other day, and he said, I think we're going to be better than everybody thinks we're going to be. He feels really good about the quarterback situation, though that's still trying to figure that out. But in this day and age, I mean, I would say half the Big 12 is sitting there going, what's our team really going to look like? They don't know until they know. I mean, heck, Mike Gundy was earlier saying that, like, I know the names of the players I've got on the roster, but I don't know necessarily their faces to match them up. And a lot of places you go, it's 40-plus new players every year, some at 50, some at 60, and like UCF, as you said. Deion Sanders dealt with that at Colorado his first year. It's just the new age, and you don't know until you know, but coaches usually have a good feel. Kenny Dillingham a year ago at Arizona State, no one quite knew what they had except for him, and he was telling people privately at that time, I think we're going to be pretty good. And not just pretty good, but maybe someone that could contend in the Big 12, and dumb media like me picked them last to finish in the Big 12. So you just don't know. The ones that do know are those coaches, and Scott Frost told me that he thinks they're going to be better than a lot of people think.
Year 3 of UCF in the Big 12. First 2 seasons, obviously, probably did not go as well as they'd wanted. What does UCF have to do to kind of break through and get to that upper half of the Big 12?
I think they just need one, really great road game win that's, against maybe a team that's just hovering right inside the top 25 or something that catapult you to a point where maybe you are able to go back home that next week or 2 weeks later and be able to build off of it. That's something you need. Momentum is, I think, everything in college football. If you win one big game, you can string that along into something else. Win a game you're not supposed to. I think in a lot of ways that's something UCF's got to do.
What do you think? What do you make of this Big 12? I mean, there's, to your point, last year was a complete flip from what we all expected. What do you make of this year's Big 12? Who are some schools maybe you're keeping an eye on? I don't know where they would be picked right now, but I really like Utah going into this year. They've got a gigantic offensive line like they usually do. They're changing things up offensively. They're going to use more RPO and spread. It's going to look like the old Urban Meyer Utah offenses, which is something that's going to probably blow people away after seeing Utah the past few years under Kyle Whittingham. Also like Arizona State with what they've got coming back with Sam Leavitt. I think they're going to be in contention. But outside that, I think that this conference is pretty much wide open. The only team I actually just don't feel too good about is Oklahoma State, to be quite honest. If I was, I'm not a betting man, but if I was a betting man, if you're saying, what's the odds of someone finishing last, I think Oklahoma State would be the maybe team to really kind of look at and bet on to do that. But again, you got to have some coaches that know their program and know how to build things and get the kids to buy in. And Gundy's that. And so maybe he'll be able to get all these they got a lot of new faces. Not just new faces, but the entire assistant coaching staff is different. So they're changing things. But I think UCF and Scott Frost is not going to be in that bottom 3 this year. I think they're going to be a little bit higher than that, maybe getting to a spot where maybe they can get to a bowl game. I got to ask you about Gus. Obviously, you covered him a long time at Auburn. You embedded with him one Saturday at UCF as well. How surprised were you to see him kind of walk away from the head job to take the Florida State job?
I wasn't shocked. I think I was on a show with you guys earlier in the season, just kind of thinking, I don't know. I just kind of got that feel that he might be stepping away soon or relatively soon, and I wasn't shocked to see him step away, but I was shocked to see him take another job immediately and go somewhere. But, I think it was probably best for everybody. I think in a lot of ways that job and what it's transformed into with NIL and handling everything, he's just a ball coach. He just likes to draw up X's and O's, and I think he saw just an opportunity to leave and go do that. And to be quite honest, I think maybe UCF's probably better for it, and he's better for it as well.
Do you see him taking a head job again?
No, I don't think so. I would say that I'd be less surprised if he took a head coaching job at a high school level rather than the college level. I think that what the college games has become is kind of probably wore him down a little bit. But having said that, with rev share era and everything, and maybe things actually kind of being a little bit calmer, maybe one day. But I think that he's probably nearing the end for him, and he's had a great career, and I think he'll be able to go out on his own terms whenever that is.